Welcome to the Grand Collaborations, a part of the Grand Podcast. My name is Niels Tuller Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grand. The Grand is now open for business, and I have therefore created the segment The Grand Collaborations, where I will launch podcast collaborations with partners. This podcast episode is a collaboration between ENCO Consulting and The Grand. Lifecycle assessment is a term that started to enter framework program course texts 10 to 15 years ago and has since been an almost obligatory part of course and naturally implemented projects. It refers to the practice of investigating a research or innovation area from a full circle point of view, making sure that when the innovation or research is implemented and carried out in one area, it doesn't have a negative consequence in another area. Mirko Busto is Sustainability Manager in ENCO Consulting, and he is responsible for the services ENCO offers in relation to life cycle assessment. In this third episode of the ENCO Series, he joins me to explain what life cycle assessment actually is and how he is working with it both in the proposal phase and the implementation phase. And, of course, also shares a practical example from the SEEDS project, which is funded by the European Commission. Please enjoy. Welcome to the Grand, the EU funding podcast. This is part of the ENCO series that I'm doing together with ENCO Consulting from Italy. We have, in collaboration, developed 3 podcast episodes together. This is the third one, so we haven't produced the third one. That's what we're doing here, the third one. And the 2 other episodes, first episode on proposal development, turning ideas into projects and proposals. And the second episode, we zoomed in on communication, dissemination, and exploitation. You can go to my website and check them out. This episode, we will zoom in on life cycle analysis, and it's actually not a topic that I've been covering before, also in my own podcast. So that's going to be very nice. Now, I've already been talking way too much here. Mirko, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you in. And before we do anything else, can you shortly introduce yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm an environmental engineer. I've got a PhD in sustainability assessment, and I've been working in life cycle assessment and also life cycle costing and techno-economic assessment mostly, and more shortly on social life cycle assessment for quite a lot of years. And I cover these topics in ENCO, basically in several European projects.
And it seems to be a whole area of its own within this project, EU project world of ours. It has sort of entered proposals in the early part of my career here in the early 10s. Suddenly they started to slip in with that should be part of the proposal, and it has become more and more. But you will be much more able to share how that is. First and foremost, let's just move straight into the first block. So why sustainability assessment matters? Can you give a short sort of introduction to the topic and why it matters?
Well, it matters because there are several challenges we are facing as a humanity, I would say. We all know about climate change, the fact that there's growing concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is driving temperatures or modifying temperature, climatic patterns. And that's going to impact our lives. It's going to impact agriculture, the way we produce food, the way we live also. And that's one of the big drivers into sustainability assessment. It's not the only one. There are several other environmental issues, if we just concern with environment, that are driving this. For example, you might have been heard about biodiversity loss. There are quite crazy numbers about the fact that we've been destroying almost more than 50% of the species in the world in the past years, in the past 40, 50 years. So there are several environmental challenges that are driving, or that the motivation behind the push towards sustainability, environmental sustainability, I mean, and that's the reason why when we are working towards innovation, that's mostly the case in European projects, so you are creating something new and you want to face some new challenge, then life cycle assessment, for example, is one of the methodologies more used, because it puts information together in order to provide an answer to if the changes we are working on can actually create a benefit towards the environment. And that can be complicated. Sometimes, like smart ideas, they look smart and they are smart, but they are not addressing the overall issues. They might be creating things that are called trade-offs. So you might end up, for example, creating something new that is creating a benefit in some areas and is getting worse in other areas.
And the reason why you have this in EU projects naturally, and maybe also why it has entered some 10, 12 years ago more and more in as being part of something that you're supposed to do, is because it's exactly what you just said here. You have a project that wants to develop something, a technology or an innovation process, but in order to make sure that it doesn't put pain somewhere else, that you need to put out a fire somewhere else suddenly because of this new technology that the Commission has funded with taxpayers' money. This is, of course, extremely important to say, okay, to zoom out and look at the full process cycle, right?
Yeah, that's also because it happened. I mean, the European Commission has been putting a lot of money in technologies that in the end ended up creating more troubles than they were solved. So that's why now they are more careful and they use things like life cycle assessment to support the decision making, to try and find the best solutions that actually drives towards real sustainability. So I mean, it's always a methodology. I mean, there are a lot of you might say it's not solved yet. I mean, it's still in progress. It's still being updated and get better, but it provides, up to now, it's the methodology that provides the more accurate and objective, let's say, answers to this term.
Yes, and you're bridging us very well into our next section here, where you will share with me and the listeners the methodologies in EU projects.
Then sustainability can be declinated in several, let's say, perspectives. It can be environmental sustainability, as we were talking, or it can be economic sustainability or social sustainability. So these three perspectives are the object of the three methodologies that we were mentioning. So life cycle assessment deals with the environmental sustainability. Life cycle costing deals with the economic sustainability, and the social with the social sustainability. So the overall term that you can find is life cycle. Also, life cycle means you are not looking at the things in isolation. You are trying to look at the whole life cycle. Think about some product. Okay, you might understand how the product is manufactured. So, what's the things that are going into the factory and what's going out of the factory, and you can measure the emissions that comes out of the factory. That's an example. Okay, but that's just the manufacture stage. But then before that, you have some materials or some products that have been used into the manufacturing. Okay, and these have been manufactured themselves, or in case they are primary material or secondary material, they have been extracted somewhere or recycled from previously end-of-life products. So there's a story before the manufacture, and there's a story after the manufacture, because there's a use stage, people use this product, and there's an end of life again. So there potentially they could be recycled, they could be sent to landfill, they could be sent to incineration, and all of that have different effects.
Mhm.
So the life cycle means to look at the overall life cycle, okay, of each product, each service. And life cycle assessment, either environmental or cost or economic or social, tries to look at this overall view of products or services.
Thanks. Let us move into how you integrate this into innovation projects. Can you share a little bit with me how you're working with the technical teams, how you work with the pilots and so on when you have to roll this out?
In most cases, we try to understand sustainability using the three pillars that we mentioned, so economic, environmental, and social. So we try to use all three of the methodologies. And that's one point. That's important because, of course, a solution, an innovation can be terribly efficient in reducing, I don't know, greenhouse gases emissions, the easier one, but it's tremendously more costly, and then it would never be reality because it would never happen. So the two things are strongly related. It must be economically viable and environmentally sustainable. But also, the third pillar, social, is important because you might end up creating huge social barriers or impacting the social environment. So the three things need to be analyzed in together. So
it's complex, no? It's because also I went through your project database in ENCO, just so it's a broad variety of projects that you have. Probably the life cycle assessment and is not part of everything that you do in the projects, but still, knowing from my own project proposal developer background, it's extremely diverse and it's extremely diverse players and the structure of the partner value chain and who you need to exchange with to make this assessment. No,
it's a kind of, I would say, kind of work that allows for, demands good flexibility and capability to dive into different subjects and different scientific fields, for sure.
Yeah, it's probably also what's exciting, no?
Yeah, it's exciting, and you also have something new to learn, for sure.
Yeah.
Also because the idea is not just to, okay, you have an idea, we are going to measure how that idea performs in sustainability terms at the end of the project. It's not like that, or at least it's not always like that. Sometimes, or mostly, we try to integrate the sustainability assessment process into the project development, meaning that, and that's also more and more required by the European level, because there are more and more projects funding scheme that demands an assessment at the proposal stage level. So they already want you to put all things together, all the information that you have together, to provide some information about what's the sustainability of your innovation. So you need to do this effort at the beginning, and you need to do this effort of putting information together and creating, let's say, a model of the sustainability of the innovation in different stages during the project in order to, let's say, inform the decisions that are being taken during the project itself. So you can help driving innovation towards more sustainability. And that's as complication, of course. That's quite complicated because we are talking about innovation. So data is not the strong point, because normally you are developing something new. So you don't know how these new things you are developing behaves exactly into reality. There might be computer models, there might be lab scale experiments. You might have collected some data. They are normally not sufficient to, let's say, design a model that can capture the whole reality of the sustainability when this innovation is deployed in real world. So there are several keywords. So, for example, there's the concept of upscaling. So you might have information at the beginning of the project, lab scale information, and you need to imagine how this lab scale information becomes industrial scale in order to compare. Comparison is another important thing, because giving numbers in isolation is not that helpful. You need to compare to something. So you need a benchmark. Okay.
Yeah.
So think about you are developing a new, I don't know, easy one, a new light bulb. Okay. But you need to compare to what are the state of your light bulb outside. And you need to demonstrate that you are doing better than what's already in the market, the state of the art out in the market. Okay. So you need to find to what you are comparing and demonstrate you are performing better. And what's outside in the market is already industrial scale. So if you are developing something that is at a lab scale, you need to understand what's going to change in your lab scale experiment to when it's coming out at industrial scale. So that's a thing that's called upscaling of the data. So collecting the data lab scale, finding upscale scheme to understand what's happening at industrial scale. That's more in the concept, or in life cycle assessment, it's called prospective life cycle assessment. So it's a trying to understand what's going to change into the process itself, but also in the background, because maybe your development cycle is taking 5 years or 10 years, and in these 10 years, things are going to change. Maybe electricity is going to be decarbonized, for example, or maybe raw materials are becoming more and more scarce, or some specific raw materials are becoming even critical, and that's why you need to pay a lot more attention to that specific. So you need to take into consideration several different aspects in order to do this kind of assessments.
Yeah. You're folding out wonderfully how complex it is, and you have already started to fold out the practical challenges. So when you do the work, when you're in there, because in the proposal phase you're not so involved. It's probably there's a text, you have some text that you develop around. Okay, we will do the life cycle assessment. So it's where you're more involved in the actual project implementation, right? So
I would not say that. If I can contradict you, sorry. I mean, most of the times we are also involved into the project preparation, and sometimes also in the concept itself. Because if in the cases where there's enough time, and it's not always the case. Sometimes we are in a hurry. The deadline is close, and you have to do as much as you can in a short time. But when there's enough time, there might be an idea. There's an idea being developed. And this idea, if you are required to perform an ex ante, let's say a project level assessment, so you need to provide some information about sustainability into the project proposal, then you need to collect all the information you have from the different partners, and you might already at the project proposal, let's say something and say, okay, this choice here that you took, this tiny amount of substance that you are planning to use into this tiny, small stage of your project, looks like it's nothing. It's a small mass, but might be a mess from an environmental perspective. Would you mind finding another solution? Okay, that's a thing that happened actually, and that's a kind of information that is precious because, for us, science is not always looking in a broad way. Most scientists are very concentrating on the specific, in-depth expertise, and they're not aware, for example, that a substance, a specific pathway to obtain this substance might have like a troubling environmental impact. They are not aware of that. So you are providing an information, and maybe for them that substance is substitutable. They can use something else. They could use something else, and they did not choose to do that because they were not aware of this kind of information. So we can already enter into the proposal writing and provide some information there. So it's not just I will do the life cycle assessment. It's always the same bricks. put together,
Yeah.
but it's tailored to the proposal and can provide already some information at the proposal stage.
Very important. Thanks for sharing this. Very
Sorry
important. Very
for more.
important. No, but it's very important to understand also for the listeners how you work. Now, you already sort of started folding out challenges now, right? So that was the proposal phase. Anything else we have here in the rundown? Data availability. You already mentioned that, and quality of those data to be able to benchmark. Is there anything else in practical challenges in the work with this that you want to mention?
Well, I would say also, sometimes there's also difficulties in sharing data because there are proprietary data, so there's a sensitivity issue.
That's
So yeah, you might have partners, they sign an NDA, but then they are not always willing to share all their information that they can because there might be. Okay, that's another difficult. And then, into the modeling itself, collecting the data is related to collecting the data, building a model. That's typical things that are happening in life cycle assessment. So data collection, you might have differences into the quality of data of different partners. Okay, you might end up having, for example, partners that have structured data collection, high quality data collected, and others that are providing estimates, broad estimates, expert estimates. So you have different set quality assumptions different quality of the data. And then the thing is that we have to identify a benchmark. So against what are we comparing? And that could be difficult sometimes, because if you are thinking, you are developing something new, that is not already out there. Okay, this thing might substitute something that is already into the market. But it could be different. It could be that this thing, the market is going to change in the upcoming time. It could be that things that are used now are not used for the same purpose in the future, and the opposite. So you are providing a substance that today is used as a substrate for something, let's say an example, and tomorrow it's not used anymore because something else is used more properly. So it's a changing world. So you need to build scenarios. So another one could be, let's say, how to communicate results. As I said, there are 3 assessments. Each assessment, I quoted the example of greenhouse gases emissions, but life cycle assessment alone can have a lot of environmental indicators, can communicate up to 17, 20 environmental indicators at the same time. So you are trying to understand what's happening at the biodiversity level, land use level, destruction of, several different environmental indicators at the same time. Okay, so within life cycle assessment only, you can already have trade-offs, meaning you have 2 potential solutions you are comparing, okay? And you are improving greenhouse gas emissions, so you are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but you are increasing destruction of the ozone barrier, for example. So you might have already trade-offs between the different indicators, okay? So you need to find a solution to communicate that. And then if you look also at the economic assessment, you have there several indicators, and the social itself have several indicators. So how to communicate this complexity in a not simple, because we don't need always to find the simplest communication point, but we need also to find something that is really effective into creating some change. Okay, so there are several efforts to do that. There are several, let's say, studies in literature to try and summarize information coming from different assessment and trying to come up to single score indicators and, let's say, matrices, multi-criteria decision matrices that put information together, for example. So there are several attempts at that, and that's always a challenge. Sometimes complexity is quite high, and so you need to at least identify trade-offs and use them as a tool to trying to minimize the negative effects that keep the good effects, at least. So you can use that as a tool to provide you information to intervene on the process and to provide, some improvement that that is measured. So you can just communicate something easily, but you can use that as something to understand what's happening out there and how to intervene to modify that in order to make it better.
Thanks. That was well done. Now, here towards the end, success story now. You are involved in a project called Seeds. Can you share a little bit about how you have been using this, how you have been working with this in the project?
Yes, Seeds is a project that deals with agriculture. Agriculture in 4 so-called MENA countries, which is Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, and Jordan. So it's agriculture in countries that are exposed to a quite high stress due to droughts, due to water scarcity in Northern Africa. So they built this project on a systemic perspective, I would say. So not just changing, for example, the genetic of the single seeds of the plants to improve the resistance or whatever, but they are looking at the overall value chain. So how can the value chain be improved to make it more resilient to challenges like climate change? Okay.
Yep.
They try to use a mix of innovation and of using traditional technology that have been abandoned, traditional practices that are very adapted to the specifics of the countries. So we are studying first the current situation, the current condition of the cultivation of such countries in these 4. And then we are studying how these innovations are going to impact the sustainability. The challenge here is that it's mostly data collection. You have countries in Northern Africa. Some of them are more, let's say, industrialized. Some other parts are more traditional, making use of a lot less chemicals and maybe also rain-fed. And this variety is happening in the same country itself. So you might have countries that have areas where agriculture is more industrialized and area where it's more traditional. We have to establish average practice. We are trying to understand what's the overall sustainability. So we created what we called archetypes. So there are several archetypes. They are representing the different kind of agriculture in the different areas of such countries. So we built these 18 archetypes. At the moment, we built this baseline. So the baseline is very important because the baseline means understanding what's happening now. And that's the reference point to which we are comparing. That's the thing we were discussing earlier. Okay, so that's against what we are establishing our innovation. Okay, so this baseline will measure what's happening now. Of course, industrial agriculture and using irrigation tends to perform better in terms of productivity. So you have normally higher yields, but also you have higher energy consumption, higher greenhouse gases emissions, and higher water consumption. Okay, so this needs to be, let's say, referred to what we call the functional unit. So what is the subject of the analysis? Okay, in this case, it was 1 kilo. It's a mass functional unit. It's 1 kilo of the cereals. Okay, so if you have higher overall per hectare, let's say, emissions in a more industrialized productive system, and then you bring up to the level of the single kilo, okay, and then you compare to a less industrialized type of agriculture, where you have lower impacts per hectare, but also lower yield per hectare, and you compare these two, you end up understanding that on a per kilo basis, sometimes one is better than the other, and sometimes it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's because so nice to have a good and practical how it works in a specific context. So thanks for this. We have to end up this conversation. Thanks for joining me. Now, before we say goodbye to listeners, I'm just gonna wrap it shortly up. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for for listening to this episode to the end. When you go to the episode notes where you listen to your podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcast, wherever, in the episode notes there's a link. So that link will take you to the website of this specific episode. You'll have a LinkedIn. You'll have a link to Mirko's LinkedIn profile, so you can reach out to him if you want to connect with him. There will be a link to ENCO's website, so you can browse around and see how they work with also this, but also the other services that they offer. And there'll be a link to the full series, the full ENCO series that I have produced together with them, with the other 2 episodes that I mentioned earlier in this episode. If you feel like checking out what I am doing as a podcaster, it's thegrant.eu. Browse around. I have lots of content on my website, so it's definitely also related to what we've been talking about here. So check that out. That's that. Mirko, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It was a huge pleasure, and in my own podcast flow, I could actually use an episode digging into the life cycle assessment. So I think we will need to connect on that also.
Okay, fine.
And I'll give you a little bit more time. Okay. Mirko, thank you so much. Let's say goodbye to the listeners. Bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Grant Collaborations, a part of the Grant podcast. This podcast episode is a collaboration between ENCO Consulting and the Grant. All episodes in the ENCO series have their own site on the Grant website. You will find the link to the episode site where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you will find the link to Mirko's LinkedIn site. Further, you will find a link to ENCO Consulting where you can explore more about the services they provide within EU funding. And of course, there's a link to the rest of the ENCO series so you can listen and dig in. This concludes the ENCO series. We hope you enjoyed them. You have been listening to the Grant Collaborations, a part of the Grant podcast.